the big story last week was, like, I don't know if you guys heard this, so the cable companies were reporting big losses, right? So Charter, all these companies that provide cable, they're experiencing losses because the millennial generation is starting to grow up and have a lot of purchasing power, and they're cutting the cable, so to speak. So because they're moving to on-demand, they've got Netflix, HBO Now, all this stuff, where they're, you know, streaming sports on some illegal channel in India or something through the internet, and so that's going down. But the big thing about that story wasn't that, because the writing's been on the wall for a long time about that. What it really was ESPN is taking a hit. So ESPN is seeing decreased viewership, and that took everybody by surprise last week in the markets, because, you know, sports fandom is as strong as it ever has been. So how could that be? And it's showing that people are making a sacrifice. So they're saying, yeah, you know, like, I grew up in Syracuse, New York, where, you know, SU basketball is like religion. You know, the coach, Jim Boeheim, is like a god. Okay, so I would love to be watching the NCAA tournament on ESPN every year, but I don't have cable, you know, and I'm consciously making that sacrifice. Like, you know, I don't want to pay $150 a month for 400 channels that I don't care about, and so we're making that decision to cut it. But what's significant about that is that we're moving to on-demand type of content. And so now that millennial group, that 18 to 24, is growing up, you know, over the next 10 years, and that's who we're dealing with, you know, as local businesses in Lake Tahoe. So I thought it was interesting. I was picking up the paper just yesterday, the Tribune, and there was this story on the cover. The main story was about, like, the top 5 best sandwiches in town, but this one on the side here was like talking about South Lake Tahoe has opportunities, challenges for a new business generation. And he was talking a little bit about Tahoe Mountain Lab and the other collaborative working space that's opening up in the Tribune building. But they had a cool insight in here. It said, millennials represent the generation aged 18 to 34. And I turned 34 last week, so I guess I'm an old guy in that generation. Most of whom came to the age at the turn of the century. Pew Research said in the first quarter of 2015 that millennials make up 1/3 of the American workforce, or 53.5 million people. So, you know, there's a big shift. And another interesting stat in that same article was the Tahoe Prosperity Center that kind of monitors you know, job growth and that kind of thing around Tahoe. So we saw a decrease in jobs, you know, between 2000 and 2008, which isn't surprising because of the recession. But then Jerome said some of the recent indicators show there's been a drop in seasonal-based jobs from 50% to 44%, a sign that more non-seasonal jobs are finding root in the basin. And so they have a picture of this guy who's a programmer who actually works for some software company in Dallas, Texas, but he lives here, works at the Tahoe Mountain Lab, he's a programmer. So, you know, so what's going on is that, you know, we've got you know, a lot of very tech-savvy young people who suddenly live in Tahoe, they make good money, and they're running around ready to spend it. You know, the other thing is that, you know, these aren't people who just know the technology. Like, a lot of them are actually involved in inventing it. You know, so we've got a lot of tourists who come up from San Francisco, Silicon Valley, you know, where Facebook and Apple, Google, all that stuff is based. So, you know, we have a lot of people who are, you know, ready to use these new web tools.